So, welcome to another episode of the Holistic Woman podcast with me, your guide, Kate Payne. And today I have Tanya Heinrich and Michelle Combridge on the line with me. These two women are friends and colleagues and fellow citizens of the area that we reside on this beautiful sacred land, and both are postpartum care providers and also women's yoga teachers, and also have some really beautiful Western modalities coming in to support women holistically as they transition through the holistic portal and also into their motherhood years. So I will start by introducing the delightful Tanya. She is a mother of 3 young boys, a postpartum care provider, a women's health yoga teacher, and certified Sacred Mama Circles facilitator, supporting mothers with loving presence, wisdom, and care to thrive during motherhood continuum. She has a background as a registered nurse, and her life path has somehow always been about integrative health and wellness. Since becoming a mother, her passion is all things sovereign maternal wellness, encompassing all facets of mind, body, and spirit. For women to have connection with their body's wisdom and tune into their body's wisdom and messages, to have knowledge, awareness, and appreciation of the menstrual cycle and the seasons of being woman, to know where to find support when needed, and to feel supported and honored as they traverse the different cycles and seasons of their life. Michelle is also a postpartum care provider and describes herself first as a woman, mother, partner, daughter, sister, friend, and guide, which just speaks so beautifully to me because as women, we are so multidimensional. Michelle has worked as an occupational therapist, specializing in neurology and stroke rehabilitation. After the birth of her second child, she started sensing a disconnect between her family values and the idea of returning to work in a hospital setting. Determined to live a slower paced and connected life, she moved to Magnetic Island and took a career pause just to be a mother, but not just to be a mother, because we know mother encompasses so much. During this time, she studied innate traditions postpartum care training and newborn mothers postpartum education and care. She's also partway through her yoga teacher training with me, which is wonderful, and is in the process of applying for her neuroprotective development care accreditation. I'd love to know more about that. Michelle has recently just launched her own business, or some would say passion project, weaving together all of her threads of wisdom to help mothers thrive in their journey throughout motherhood. And Michelle and Tanya do beautiful work together in the community to support women. So welcoming you both onto the Holistic Woman podcast. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you, Kate. That was a beautiful introduction.
I would love to begin by perhaps, Tanya, you'd kick off by sharing the season that you are currently in and how you are finding moments of celebration.
Well, I feel like I'm in a couple of seasons simultaneous. The season of menstruation, the season of postpartum, and the season of motherhood. And finding those pockets of celebration. I think it's been a journey through that. I think it's not until I've arrived in my postpartum, probably third time round in the season of mothering, that I have really started to appreciate and really tap into my menstrual cycle. And then also really savored and harnessed the potentiality of the postpartum period. And then, of course, that weaving into the motherhood journey. I think, when we move through our cycles and we're able to tap in and notice our patterns, or perhaps, the inner whisperings of our bodies, we are able to honor that and recognize that, okay, this might be the time for deeper rest right now, or here I've got energy. Let's harness that with the family, and knowing that, and trusting that it's not when you're feeling the tiredness or the stagnation, that's not going to be absolute. We're going to move through that, and we're going to find those pockets. And so I really I noticed that I have started to really celebrate this, and also sharing this with my boys as well.
Mm.
Cyclic wisdom, the cycles, I should say, and the seasons of women. So they can see this as well as something very much innate to woman, and part of the way, you know, the world is, and how we move through life, or how life is created, sustained, and yeah.
Beautiful. And I think it is so important, as you touch on, that we are able to share with our boys, and we all have at least one boy. So to be able to share this sacred wisdom and these rites of passage with them, to really create generational shift and change, so that when they become, you know, partnered with, you know, whether it's man or woman, that they, and if they choose then to move through the path of having children in whatever way that may look for them, then they have this wisdom that they are able to share with their partner, or the woman who's carrying their child. So I think it's really, it's so important. And I want to just recognize that in you, that you are, you know, passing this beautiful lineage on to your boys, who then will pass on to their own children.
Yeah.
And Michelle, your season that you are currently in, and moments that you're finding to celebrate.
Yeah, so similarly, I am in menstruation, motherhood, and fertility. So I find moments to celebrate, just going with the flow. I found after my second, I started to really find that connection with my body. Before that, probably not so much. So I've really learnt through practice and rituals to honour where I'm at in the moment, and taking just that pause, taking that time to connect with self wherever I am. I've also been very open with my children in my cyclic journey, and bringing awareness to what menstruation is, and the essence and the power that women have through their cyclic beings. And I celebrate the bleed. So I have changed since having my second how I tend to my bleed, and I really honour it as a transition into my next cycle. Cameron and I are planning maybe on a third. So I'm finding really taking note of where I am in the cycle is really important for this next journey.
Wow. You've both made mention to the fact that it's been based on your own embodied experience as you've moved through fertility, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, that has really propelled you into wanting to gift the wisdom that you obtained during those processes and experiences, transitions, to other women. So you both made mention of disconnection that you had prior to postpartum. So I wonder if you can speak a little bit more to that, and why it is so important then that as women we have the support, and we have those wisdom keepers who have walked the path before us, to be able to support and guide and offer insight as we move through these paths that we've not yet walked before.
Would you like me to speak to that?
Sure.
Yeah. So my own journey, I was stuck in a world after children of trying to bounce back, and trying to prove to the world that I could do it. So completely disconnected and disregarding my own internal, intrinsic voices, and the whispers of what I truly needed. And second time round, it wasn't as kind to me. So I did battle through the postpartum period, a lot of illness, because I was trying to do it all. So within that, I was able to take a seat backwards and actually to view my journey through that postpartum period and really evaluate what I needed. And that's when I started diving into why and how can this be a better journey. Surely this is not how it is meant to be for women as we procreate. So yeah, that's when I dived into and found Innate Traditions training module, and I started learning all about the cross-cultural and traditional modalities of postpartum care and support. So for me, it was past patterns that were surfacing during my postpartum period, which I've done a lot of work on trying to heal and reframe to reconnect with my body, my mind, and my spirit.
I wonder your thoughts, Tanya.
Yeah. You know, I really believe that as we like transition through this portal of mother, this you know, the pregnancy, the birth portal, and into the postpartum, there is such a potency of this time, and a lot of you know, perhaps semi-dormant strengths are awoken in this time. And like there is this opportunity, just like biologically and like emotionally, there's a rewiring that happens in our bodies. You know, it's very hormonally driven, of course, and like by harnessing these times, we can we deepen our sense of intuition, and we're able to really read subtle cues, you know, of others, like, which is perfectly designed to understand, you know, or read the cues of baby. We become very, you know, we have a lot of rewiring happening in the brain, you know, when we speak about baby brain and the experience of matrescence. There is a lot of rewiring that happens, and we can really harness the potentiality of that. And, you know, sort of are looking outwardly at times to have connection and friendships and bonding. I think that though, like in my experience, having felt so disconnected from the body, and then coming in, and intuition, and then coming into the postpartum time, really wanting to seek out, you know, answers for things, or like a curiosity there, and not yet at that moment in time being able to sort of really tap into one's inner knowing and intuition, because it's like, how do I do that? Like, this feels foreign. It is this seeking out of support or wisdom from other people. And sometimes, and oftentimes, it is Google, right? Like, how am I doing this? And I think that what I noticed to be really lacking in my you know, initial experiences was the presence of the wise women, of the women that have, you know, like traversed their journey as mother, and can see, you know, have kind of cultivated the learnings of that time, who can then impart their wisdom in a way that is like kind of dosed perfectly for where one is at, you know, and then also guiding one back into their inner knowing, into their intuition. It's like that remembering, or that reconnection, with self. And I really feel like this is like just such an essential element, is to have these you know, these margers, or these crones that are there, like guiding us back into self, and just acknowledging the immensity of change. Gone in different directions here.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's so important in all seasons of our lives as a woman. I think that concept of just the perfect dose for that individual woman at that time is so beautifully articulated, because I think sometimes when we hold a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge and a lot of embodied experience, we have to be really mindful of not overwhelming other people with all of that wisdom all at one time as well, and just picking out, like you say, that perfect little dose, and gifting that to the woman and having her, it really though being an invitation, as you said, to return inwardly and find that place within where she actually already has that wisdom and that innate knowing, but it's just offering that dose and that path of remembrance.
Yes.
I want to talk about now that you've both come, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've both come from the Western healthcare model and transitioned over and now are sort of interweaving between the two into these more holistic Eastern perspectives of women's care. I came into women's wellness and work in women's health in the other direction. So I came from the Eastern perspective and then made my way into Western healthcare, pretty quickly found the revolving door to come back out of there but of course, like, still interweave with some practices and modalities in Western healthcare still. But I wonder your experience, if you're willing to share how it has been for you to come from a Western perspective into seeing these more holistic ways of working with women, and why you now feel like that's such an important aspect of your work to be able to see through those two lenses.
For me, I think I've always had a real holistic approach to well-being. As an occupational therapist, the lines are very blurry about what is occupational therapy.
Yeah.
It is the art of optimizing a person's independence and well-being, which I think fits so perfectly into postpartum education and care. So to me, it's a beautiful weaving of the wisdom. What I do struggle with sometimes is the fact that life is not linear. So when our professions and the Western medical model really drives in that evidence-based care, that pooling studies around particular cohorts of the mainstream, and we're required to utilize that in our practice. It's not that. Every person is unique, so it's finding that sweet spot to call upon all the different elements to be a holistic approach to what that person needs in that moment. So I've come from that Western model, but I feel like I've always been very holistic in my approach, and I'm not disregarding the evidence-based practice. I really do feel there is importance to call upon science, but it's also being aware of what feels right to the woman in that particular moment, and guiding a woman to know how to call in to what feels right. So yeah, that's sort of my outlook on the East versus West, if you want to pitch it that way.
Yeah.
Tanya, do you have more to share?
Yeah, so my background is a registered nurse, and that's what I studied straight out of school, and found my way over to Alice Springs and was in emergency nursing. And so I did sort of postgraduate studies in emergency nursing. And I think, like, during those modules, it was what touched upon women's health in that regard was birth. If someone was arriving for birth, and, you know, in the learning, it was like, it's an emergency, this is how you respond. It's like, duh, duh, duh. So it's kind of like ABC, you know, or that linear approach in the experience there. So, and I think sometimes too, we're given this, you know, these understandings, but in some ways there is a negating of one's own truth, and really rising that individual up and seeing them in their beauty, in their truth, in their capacity, you know, like, and holding them in that regard. So I don't know, really, I'm trying to, I guess what I want to sort of reflect upon is my like welcoming into the women's wellness through, like, I guess the Western approach was very different to also what I had experienced with growing up, a lot with, you know, traditional modalities around me, and understanding menstrual cycles in a different light that was kind of offered in this Western approach.
Well, I think as you spoke to, Michelle, it's not even a case of an East versus West. And you and I have had so many conversations about the both and, that it gets to actually be this beautiful interweaving. And I mean, your business name is Weaving Wellness, so it's so perfectly tied in, but it gets to be aspects of both, dependent on the individual needs of the woman. And so I think the external, what it looks like, is less important from my lens as how the woman feels when she's accessing either an Eastern, more holistic approach, or whether she's accessing a Western approach. And as you were talking, Tanya, it reminded me actually of also the circles that we what do you call it, like that we walk in, that we're part of, will be really dependent then on our lens in which we see and experience fertility and birth and pregnancy. And it got me thinking about my first pregnancy, and I don't believe that I would have known that much, if really anything, about, say, home birth as an example. When I had my first child, I was very much entrenched in the Western medical system. I chose to go private. I chose to have a private OB. It was very, you know, like, as you say, like, it was very like, you do this and then you do this and then you do this, and this is what the 9 months looks like, and this is what your experience will be like. And it was through that experience of having a high risk pregnancy from 20 weeks onwards that really propelled me then back into self and back into my work with yoga and yoga therapy, to really say, well, hang on a second, my experience doesn't look now or feel like what they're saying it should look like. And that was really my first, you know, forte into really questioning not just the Western medical model for women moving through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, but also just life and my upbringing and my belief system, and the circles that I was in, and the ideas and beliefs within those circles as well hadn't really spent a lot of time then contemplating, well, what does pregnancy mean to me based on my experience, and what do I want this to look like, and how do I want this to feel, and can it look and feel a way that I would like it to, despite the external circumstances. And I think when we have practitioners like we all are, that are able to weave our way into both the Eastern holistic and the Western healthcare, then we really do offer these moments of remembrance for the woman to be able to come back into self and say, well, how do I want to feel in this experience, despite how it might look from the external?
Yeah.
And I think that is all about harvesting the gems from the experience. Our wise teacher, Rochelle, from Innate Traditions, spoke to this, that we've all traveled the journey that we've needed to travel. It's about harvesting the gems from those particular experiences, which spoke to me so much, because I considered my first birth to be traumatic in my perception, and I needed to do a lot of healing through that. And I feel like I had that birth so I could come to this place and offer my support to mothers traversing motherhood through the different elements. So similar to you, Kate, you've harvested those gems from your experience to meet that moment. So
Yes, yes. And there's a lot of gems. I have like truckloads of gems out the back, right? There's been so many moments of despair that I've grabbed a little gem and thrown it in the truck.
yeah, I think it's just having that awareness, isn't it? It's paying attention to that experience and chucking a different lens on it, for lack of a better word, to really call upon why and how and what am I going to take away from this. So I think we all have lots of gems.
It's true. And I think like it is like alchemizing these hardships, that we move through, and like mining the gems of that, and then offering something really beautiful to the world, may it be to ourselves and beyond, and creating that as a gift, in one's own healing journey, and then sharing that wisdom with others as well.
This is a beautiful segue into speaking about the continuum of that holistic portal from fertility, pregnancy, birth, and into postpartum. And with everything so interconnected, how does your experience of working with women and your own personal embodied experience, how important is what happens in those moments before postpartum? How do they impact the postpartum period? Because really, if you're as a postpartum care provider, your first kind of introduction to women, for some of these women, you've worked with them also during pregnancy for postpartum planning, but you may not have been there from the very beginnings of their fertility journey, and it may have been, quite tumultuous. So how important is it then for you to have an understanding of the woman's experience pre-postpartum? And then how do you work so beautifully with her to start to really digest and reflect and assimilate these experiences that have happened prior to her coming to the postpartum phase, to ensure that her postpartum period and this season of postpartum, which really is a short season in the grand scheme of a woman's life, is so nourishing for her?
It's a really great question, Kate. And I think like just reflecting on that, I think that something that strikes me as really essential and important in this piece is this sense of acknowledgement, holding, this non-judgment, this witnessing, this honoring and affirming of this woman's journey, and recognizing that, it may have been tumultuous, to recognize that we all have our conditioning and patterns. We all have traumas in our lives, that can play out, that can really rear its head in this portal, in this time, for healing. It's a really potent time for healing. And, like when we consider from the Ayurvedic lens about the postpartum period, how like the first 42 days can really set us up for the next 42 years, and how women can heal physically and emotionally. I'm going to add in emotionally too, ailments that they've had like pre-existing. They can heal this in this postpartum time, and it just blows my mind, and that is with the right support and care and community. But yeah, so how we can support women through that, I think it is offering a lot of self-reflective questions. And it's something that will take time. It's as much as the woman wants to go, and it's sort of sensing that. It's again like having the finger on the pulse and being like, okay, where, like how deep do we go here, or how is she responding to that? But I think it's a really amazing time to reflect on one's own mother wounds, one's own, I guess, experience of being woman, of being in her body. And I think another piece around being a postpartum care provider is also knowing where you can direct this woman to, like, who are the other practitioners in the community that can really offer, this nourishing support, with their expertise, in those areas, if she's requiring that. But even reflecting on like how she wants to mother, the relationship with her partner, what her expectations are, what's her vision, what's her ideal mother, like what is this perfect mother that she holds in her mind's eye, like, and just sort of I guess having these conversations.
Yeah, beautiful. It just, as you're speaking, it just always reminds me of just the potency of the postpartum period and how there are so many moving parts, and it's not until you cross the threshold of birth and you are actually in the postpartum period that you really, it's almost like then the veil on all of these things is lifted, and all of a sudden everything is present, right? And everything is there right in front of you. And that is where I think, having postpartum care providers like you and Michelle is so important in the community, because it offers someone to hold space for that. Yeah, so that the woman and the women don't feel like they've been left post-birth with all of this there and they just don't know what to do with it, because in our Western culture we've never been taught how to work with and hold space for all of these things. And I think that's where the postpartum care provider work really, for me, really, that's the sacred nectar right there. I wonder what your experience, Michelle, is with this whole conversation around postpartum.
Yeah, I think you've just touched on it, and saying that word nectar, it's like that seed of potentiality of where to from here, because without that support and that nourishment in that postpartum period of holding the mother, then it can go many different ways. So I think it's that seed of potentiality that I really am drawn to in providing postpartum care and education. And I think, as Tanya mentioned, the birth, the experiences before birth and fertility, pregnancy, birth will influence the postpartum period. And it's all about bringing in that connection with self to heal or to reflect on those moments, so that they don't have a downward spiral effect in a woman's mental health, in her ability to connect with her baby, in her relationships with partner, family. So it's really a holding of space to bring a woman back to self, because that birth portal is so it opens us up as a woman. So it's really helping a woman come back to herself. It just gets me excited talking about it.
Yeah, me too, because I think it's just so, there's such a potency to it, and it really opens up this well of wisdom, really, for women to be able to tap into and access. And sometimes we just have to be reminded of that, and also be offered, a pathway and some tools to be able to traverse, the often icky and uncomfortable path to get there, to really find that sweet nectar.
And I think it also, sorry to interrupt, and I just wanted to add, I think it goes beyond having a mother or a grandmother come in, or a friend drop in. That's part of the puzzle of postpartum care, because we do need our village. But having a postpartum care provider that has this wealth wisdom or knowledge that can bring a woman back to self without all the added extras, I think is where that potentiality lies.
That I agree. And I want to touch on the village because you've brought it up. And I was going to speak about this later in the conversation, but let's talk about it now because it's come into the field of awareness. The concept of the village. I have very differing thoughts on this concept of the village, of the way we've been sold the concept of the village, the way that the village used to be in form that is no longer, and then our vision for the village. So I'd love to get both of your insights. I've done a podcast on this previously where I've spoken to the village, and I've spoken also from something that you had shared, Tanya, which was around the concept of community, and also the concept of the village. So I'd love to get your insights into, from both of you, what does the village mean to you in this Western culture, and is it possible?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it's, I think a lot of women have that felt sense that the village is lacking. And it's also, I think for many, when we arrive into motherhood, we realize the value and the necessity of village. And in our sleep deprived haze, in our whole unbecoming and becoming, we are seeking the village and trying to cultivate that and create that. And it feels painful because we notice the absence, and it feels hard because we're not our best alert selves, like in that process, especially if we're like immediately postpartum. And then we're having to be very creative in the ways that we create that, like that we call in a village. So I think like a village is practical support, physical presence, and also connection. I feel like, we are so interdependent as humans, and we are wired for connection from the get-go. So in this modern day, how do we create the village? It's really the question. And so it can look like many, many things. Like it can look like paid help, having someone come and clean the home, having, like meals delivered to the door, or it can look like, postpartum care providers. It can look like perhaps a nanny or an au pair. Like in many ways, it can look like that. And I think it is coming back into perhaps the neighborhood level, even in some ways. And it is finding, I guess, that circle of like-minded and like-hearted women who reflect us back to our truth and rise us up through the thick and through the thin, through the ups and through the downs. Like, to have that holding. Yes, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think it's about calling in the tribe that really resonates with you and gives you that felt sense of safety. I know, reflecting on my own experience through both of my postpartum periods, at about the 6-month mark, I really felt a real sense of lack, and I felt lost. And I had many friends and I had family, but I didn't have those soul family connections that would help me really integrate those birth experiences. And I feel like that's what village can feel like. There's no one size fits all. It's dependent on the individual. And as Tanya said, village can look and feel like so many different things. And it's different elements of practical support, community, connection. But it's making sure that mother doesn't feel alone during that really vulnerable period of what postpartum is, because it can feel lonely, it can feel scary. So it's having that tribe to raise a mother during those periods of hardship.
I think I also think that there's an element too of intergenerational members that create the village. You know, like we speak about the wise women. You know, the women that have have been, you know, navigating it before us, and so these tend to be like, yeah, the older women in the community, and then even the maidens, you know, with their energy, and like, I guess, you know, carefree lives in the sense that they don't have family right now, like they don't have children or offspring right now to care for. They're more available and yeah, flexible. I feel like it's like it encompasses like kind of all these generations, yeah, coming together and supporting in different ways, because the needs of a child is immense. So much more than what one person or you know, two people being the couple of the parents of the nuclear family can give that child. It's and I think now in this modern day we're really trying, I think with the influences of, you know, social media and Pinterest and things like this, we're able to we have this idea of how we need to meet all these needs of our children, and it can feel so much, it can just feel very overwhelming and a lot, and probably invoke stress, you know, and a lot of, especially new mothers. Yeah.
And I also think traditionally we before globalization and modernized, we came from a background of allo parenting. I'm not sure. And now with these globalizations and modernized culture and social media, there's a lot of pressure on what is now the nuclear family to have it together. So I think sharing the load of parenting helps to grasp onto what allo parenting is. So it's, you know, having that grandmother to call upon if needed. It's having that friend to come around for a cup of tea just so you can have an adult conversation. It's having someone to bring a meal around if you really need it. Yeah. So it's sharing the load so that the overwhelm that Tanya's just touched on isn't so in your face.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing from both of you is that it doesn't look like anything specific. And I think that's that piece that I was touching on around, we've been sold a model of what the village looks like, as opposed to what it feels like, which is underpinned by what we find value in that moment of the postpartum. So there's a couple of things that I want to touch on here. The first being the importance of the sacred masculine to come in and actually be a holder of space for the feminine, for the woman, as she traverses the postpartum period. And when I think about my own experience in both of my births, but particularly round 2, my second birth, there were what felt most alive and present and needed in those postpartum days was actually a very, very small circle, very small. So my husband, my son, our new daughter, my private midwife that also then transitioned into being postpartum care provider, and a few very close friends and family that provided support from a distance. And that felt really, really important and underpinned by our values to have space, because spaciousness felt really important, and just time to be as one, as a family. And so making sure that the needs of all were being met in a way that felt nourishing, supportive, and spacious. And so I think it's really that felt sense. So it can look really big. It can look like lots of family present, and it can look like lots of hands on deck helping with washing and cooking and all of the things. And also it can look completely the opposite of that, or something in between. And I think that felt sense is really important. the masculine coming in to hold, because oftentimes we do as women, and also cross-culturally it really is the women holding the women. But I really think in our Western culture we actually also need to look at the men holding the women as well, and I think that's a really big missing piece in a lot of work. And then the other aspect that I wanted to touch on was ceremony and ritual that you both bring in so beautifully into the postpartum period, and specifically the closing of the bones ceremony. Can you both speak about your experience with closing of the bones? Tanya, I've had the immense privilege of being part of a closing of the bones ceremony with you for one of our dear soul sisters, and the ceremony is in and of itself is sacred medicine, and then when held by such beautiful wisdom keepers, it really amplifies that experience. So I wonder if you can both speak to that.
Oh yeah, thank you. I'm so grateful to that experience, holding space with you, Kate. Will be forever etched in my memory and my heart. Yes, I am deeply grateful to my teacher, Rochelle Garcia Saliga, for sharing the practice or the wisdom of the closing of the bones using rebozos, which have their lineage to Mexico. Beautiful pieces of long cloth that ties around a woman's body and provides like a closing physically and energetically. And what I've learned is that cross-culturally there is this practice of using long cloth to tie the body, from Russia to Arab cultures to Mexico. So to create a ceremonial space, to create a space where this mother is witnessed, her rite of passage deeply acknowledged and honored and loved. I feel very emotional about this because I feel that this is what every mother is deserving of, to feel really acknowledged. Like this is a massive thing. We're bringing life into the world. We are nourishing life. We are nourishing the next generation. And there is so much healing, and there is so much healing that can happen, in this threshold. And to be able to create a space, a sacred container where a woman can rest and really reflect, and have this sense of deep appreciation of self, appreciation of, the creator, and the, the spiritual realms really that are opened up in this journey. I think is just something, magic, and it's beyond magic. It's like such an honor to be the space holder in this. And so, yeah, I've feel very blessed to have opportunity to provide this to offer this ceremony for mothers, for them to really just rest in there and to have an experience of really this cocooning, this holding physically with the rebozos, holding the body, and also just in the emotional sense as well, this holding. And perhaps there's this space for messages or alchemizing again, these revelations of becoming mother. So yes.
Yeah, and I think Tanya touched on it, but before I go ahead, Tanya, you speak so emotionally about closing of the bones, and you are an amazing holder of space. You hold a beautiful container, and yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that. But yeah, you touched on the rites of passage, and I think that's what the closing of the bones ceremony is all about. It's being able to create the space and the time for a mother to integrate her journey through the birth portal. As Tanya mentioned, this is where the birth portal is, when a mother feels her most vulnerable. She's exposed everything, she's open. And by creating a ceremony around the postpartum period, and it's allowing a mother to be witnessed on this journey in a safe container where she can share whatever arises and be held and witnessed. And it's the witnessing which is that seed of potentiality that we spoke about before. It's that witnessing that allows a mother to integrate all those gems, to harvest all those gems. And then it allows her to move forward to then mother from a place of reverence for herself and the continuation of her family. And then it brings me to this thought about a mother's well-being and how the health of a mother is critical to the health of her family. So I feel like that postpartum ceremony is so critical in then the health of her family and thereafter. So there is so much potency with these postpartum ceremonies that really can be drawn upon. So, and I'm excited to move forward. Tanya and I are working together on holding this space together, which I can feel the magic already.
Absolutely. All the lucky women in this community to be able to have access to that. And I know, Tanya, you were offering some mobile closing of the bone ceremonies on a recent trip as well. So knowing for women who are listening, knowing that if there isn't someone in your area, that, you know, you are able to reach out to others who may be traveling, who may be willing to offer closing of the bones. But for those women who can't access it, ritual plays a really important role in the postpartum period, and that's something that all women can access in their own way, shape and form. So I wonder if you can both speak about some of your favorite rituals postpartum that maybe you used yourself or that you use regularly with the women that you work with that provide that nourishing support.
Yeah, I really love this, and I think that, you know, Jessie Harold, who is a doula author, she's incredible. You can find her on on social media as well. But I did a course with her called The Village, and, you know, she had this beautiful way of articulating that, you know, ritual is putting a pin in the map of life and saying this matters. And I think, like the ceremony that we just spoke about, but creating ritual around motherhood, around our rite of passage, it's like this acknowledgement that this matters. This is a big deal. And I think it's something that our society lacks to acknowledge. It sweeps under the carpet. Oh, this is just a bit of a mess here. She'll come out soon. Like, you know, so I feel like when we can reclaim and take this back into our own hands and create spaces where we can offer ourselves ritual, which makes meaning, gives us deep meaning to this experience of postpartum and motherhood, is something phenomenal and beautiful and uplifting, where we can feel the joy and the grief, like the both and in that case. So in terms of rituals, I feel like it is anything that helps one reconnect inward to self, reconnect with the divine essence that resides in self. And this can be as simple as lighting a candle. It can be as simple as calling in one's energy and presence when they're drinking a cup of tea. Some other pieces of ritual can look like offering oneself self-massage. So, you know, ideally in the immediate postpartum, you know, up to the 4 to 6 weeks, allowing a lot of rest, allowing deep rest as the body recovers and heals, not from a pathological sense, but from the sense that this you know, your body has grown life, it has birth life, it has like gone to the highest potentiality of a woman's body. And this requires time for healing and integration. And so in this restful time, we can support the lymphatic system by offering like massage. And Abhyanga is one form of massage from Ayurvedic or the Indian science of using like black sesame seed oil and stimulating the lymphatic flow. And this is also known as like, I think oil and love is the same word in Sanskrit. So it's offering, you know, self-love as a form of ritual. Breath, using the breath to come back into presence is definitely a form of ritual, and something that I feel so grateful to you, Kate, for learning so much more, you know, within the yoga teacher training and ways of coming back into the body. I feel like rituals that bring honor, meaning, and then an invitation back into one's body really, can be really beautiful practices. I'm sure, Michelle, you have some more ideas and suggestions around the ritual.
Yeah, I feel like you described ritual so well. I don't need to add anything extra, but I do want to touch on that ritual can be anything. As long as you put that meaning, as long as you have that meaning behind what you're doing and you connect into it to meet that moment, it will create that ritual. So simply having a shower, that can be a ritual. And that is a daily ritual that everyone, well, most of us take part in. But instead of doing it as an activity, bringing back to the awareness piece is what creates that ritual. So, you know, cleansing the body and just being aware and attending to yourself in a way that has meaning creates that ritual. And yeah, like you said, lighting a candle. I've actually got my beautiful candle sitting beside me that helped me drop into presence and be in this moment to sit with you ladies right now. So I did a little ritual to acknowledge this space and bring honor to this time. Yeah.
I am conscious of time, and there's so many other things that I would love to talk about. And I think this just calls then for sure for a part 2 of this, where we can dive into even more around mother-centered care, empowered birth, you know, the various pathways to postpartum, all of these pieces. So, you know, if you're both willing, I'd love to have you back for another episode. But for today, would love to wrap up by having you both share what your vision for not just women's wellness, but if we then narrow that lens to women's wellness in the postpartum period, what is your vision?
My vision for women moving through the postpartum time is that it is a period of time, a rite of passage that is acknowledged by society, that there are measures in place that support the mother in this time, that there are that community, that people around us have awareness around some of the key ways to support mothers.
So my vision for women's wellness in the postpartum period is for mums never to feel alone, and for our community to acknowledge the immense journey that a woman has been on and is on, going through the continuation of motherhood. So from the journey through fertility, pregnancy, birth, and beyond. And I feel like we've still got a lot of work to do in bringing that cultural awareness so that it's something that is just part of the journey in motherhood, that women are not seeing themselves as having to look a certain way and bounce back and looking like they've got it all together. Instead, they're honoring the transition that they have just traversed from maiden to mother or mother again. I think we've started to uncover this potency, this magic of honouring women in the postpartum period. But as I said, I think we've still got a long way to go. And yeah, I want all women to honour themselves, to rest, to really honour that sacredness of the mother-baby dyad, to really connect with baby. And yeah,
so beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Michelle. Is there anything that you want to close with, Tanya?
Yeah, I love everything. I love all the threads of conversation here today, and yes, for a next episode. I feel like I really just want to acknowledge too that my wish is for mothers to be able to cultivate a sense of self-compassion, of self-kindness as they move through this sacred window of time. That it will feel hard, because we are invited to really examine aspects of self as we let go, as we become better and better versions of ourselves for our children and for the world. And it's uncomfortable, and I just wish for every mother to feel compassion towards them, and to invite that self-compassion inward as they navigate their journey.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for your time and your energy today in this beautiful conversation, and I look forward to many, many more in the future.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you so much for having us on here with you. I feel very, very humbled and deeply grateful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Kate. I just want to say that you're an amazing teacher and mentor.
Thank you so much.